Welcome to the Dawn and Steve Plus podcast, fueled by Raphael's Roastery and supported by you. Connect to us on socials or dawnandsteveplus.com.
Toxic people, toxic relationships, toxic mold, toxic men, toxic women, toxic food. I mean, there's a lot of toxicity going on in our world right now, Phil Herndon, and I am so curious when we think about what makes a toxic person, because if you disagree with me and you push back on anything, it might be that I call you toxic because you're not giving me my way. There is really, though, something about someone being legitimately toxic. What makes somebody toxic?
Well, the word toxic.
I want to say it one more time. Toxic.
Toxic?
Yeah.
Toxic.
What makes somebody That is a brilliant intro of toxicity.
That really, I was just thinking that's.
I feel like you need to say it one more time now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Is that a toxic intro? That's what I need
toxic.
to
Ooh.
know.
So toxic.
Now I'm just going to blush.
Maybe it's toxins.
Oh, it is. I'm sure it is. I'm sure, but lots of water to flush it out.
Toxic. Well, toxic is a loaded phrase, clearly. It means poison, malignant, like there's ugly words attached to it. And there are moments where all of us are toxic. We're guaranteed. I'm going to have toxic moments every day at some point. But that's a popular word these days: toxic masculinity, toxic this, toxic that. And what it really points to is the word unhealthy. There are people who are unhealthy, but that we are a society of jargon and labels, and so it is, like you said, it moves everything from you disagree with me to you're really, really, really unhealthy and dangerous. And so I think it's important that we define that word well or before we use it.
Well, yes, exactly. Because I heard someone say the other day, every person who is a toxic person is a difficult person, but not every difficult person is a toxic person,
Okay, yeah.
right? Some people just
Yes.
have personalities
Uh-huh.
that maybe, you're more introverted and reserved and a deeper thinker and whatever, and you are having to deal with a type A of driver and whatever. That type A person may not be a toxic person,
That's right.
but they may be difficult for you to deal with.
Yes.
Just because of personality conflicts and things.
Yes.
So I think that label toxic sometimes could get slapped on things a little too quickly and too easily. So, is there a clinical definition for a toxic person?
There is an unofficial one.
Okay.
As far as the literature goes, I don't know if there's anything written like that. But think about just in signage, when something is toxic, it's the skull and crossbones.
Yeah.
It's like, man, wear hazardous material gear, don't go near it, don't breathe it. So it's the same idea. There are some people who are really dangerous to be with. They cause harm. That's what toxic really means. And that's where things like boundaries and things like that come in. But toxic people are people who are dangerous to be in relationship with. Some physically dangerous. So you have rage control, for instance. They're impulsive and reactive. And then there are people that are harmful because they blow through boundaries or violate boundaries. And people who are just extremely disagreeable, and they're not going to let a person be right regardless. So there are all kinds of continuums in the language that we use to describe relationships and people.
It's fascinating to me because you start thinking about your relationships and people that might fit that bill or someone that you thought was toxic, and then you hear that definition and you go, oh, well, maybe they're not. Maybe we're just disagreeable on things. But that label gets slapped on so quickly. If we're not going to label something because this society we live in, how do we back that off and start looking at things a little more objectively so we don't have to quantify and qualify everybody as a certain thing, especially this whole toxicity thing?
That's right. And I think the answer to that question, Dawn, is curiosity and compassion. And that those two can be buzzwords. Sometimes it's amazing how, we have adages through the years, like you can't judge a book by its cover. And, first impressions don't always tell the whole story. So we have become a soundbite world. TikTok and Snapchat and Twitter bites and all those different ways we have of, just splicing, pulling out one bit of a video, one part of a comment. And so our brains have been wired to be able to look at people as a series of sound bites or a series of things rather than one whole person. So I think it's super important that we take the time, and I mean literal time, minutes, hours to get to know someone before we put a label like that on them, because sometimes a person's having a bad day or that person's temperament is real different than mine and they scare me, so I may need to ask a lot of questions, and them ask a lot of questions of me to get to know them. We talk about story a ton when the three of us are together.
Yeah.
Get to know the story, not so they can justify the reason they're the way they are, but when you really get to know somebody, to know where they're from, to know what makes them tick, as we used to say, it answers a lot of questions and can keep a whole lot of labels away.
When we have taken the time to get to know someone in that way, we understand the story, and you're like, okay, I kind of get why they do what they do. And I get why maybe I even participated in some of that relationship. And maybe it was, wanting to think the best, extending compassion, wanting to, not judge too quickly. And so we hear the story, and then we recognize the dysfunction, and we're like, yeah, that's not very healthy. I know that relationship needs to change because it can't continue the way in which it has been. To begin to put those healthy boundaries in place for the toxic or the more difficult or the potentially toxic person, probably not going to be received real well. Right. So as we begin to have to, in a sense, once we understand the story, if we have to redefine the relationship, then any advice on how we begin to do that? Yeah.
Very carefully.
Yeah.
The older I said to somebody this week, it was like a coffee conversation, I think, not in a session, but I said to them, the older I get, the more I come to believe that the single greatest test of emotional and relational health is, can that person set boundaries? Can that person tolerate other people setting them with them? Like, can I be healthy enough to tell you the truth of where I need you to stop? And when you tell me that, can I tolerate it? And so there are some people, the answer to that question is no. They can't have a limit put on them. They can't take no for an answer, so to speak. And there are people out there, whether it's their story or trauma or temperament or a personality disorder or something, they are unable to recognize when they're being harmful. And so those are people that, unfortunately and sadly, we have to move the fences way out to say, I can't let you come any closer. And those are scary conversations to have, because boundaries have all kinds of myths with them. I'm being mean. I'm not being understanding. I'm being judgmental. And sometimes it's not any of that. Sometimes it's like, when I'm trying to be in a relationship with you, it becomes too dangerous, and I have to have the boundaries here.
And you mentioned some of the responses that can happen from the other person. How do you just continue in story and hope they can contain when you're saying, no, this is what's happening, and this is why I need to set this boundary. Let's see how this goes. Let's see if we can. Because I can also remember times, like, I lived in a different state in the Midwest, and I felt like somebody was saying no to me when really it was just a cultural difference in how they communicated. And so I had to get over that, because they weren't trying to harm me. They were just saying something. But that's trivial. That's getting to know the person and understanding from where he or she is coming. But if the person sets a boundary to the other friend, and the friend says, "Oh, I can't do that because now you're harming me." Is there anything that's helpful to do in that situation?
Yeah, there's an old phrase in that kind of thinking around boundary setting is boundaries are negotiable. And again, the one another's in Scripture. We can hang in with one another and just ask even questions about that. And this sounds tedious, and relationships are tedious. One more thing that social media has done, it's taken this idea that relationships are designed to go for the long haul if you have proximity to one another. And so, but we've lost that as well. And, we will proclaim someone as toxic, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to really move in and out of a relationship and negotiate those boundaries. And so there's probably a lot of relationships that are cut off prematurely because it's just a lot of trouble to do that and to ask those questions, and not necessarily ask questions that are inquiring about story, but to say, Have I not been clear? Not in a sarcastic way, but have I not been clear? Is the way I've asked you that, no, I can't spend that kind of time with you, for example, am I not being clear about that? Or is there something else going on? Like, just to be able to ask those questions of ownership. And, we used to call it defining the relationship. And there's a lot to be said for how in our culture and our world we move so quickly from one thing to another that sometimes we don't have those conversations. It takes a whole lot to work through.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the one another's of Scripture, because I know that for me, for example, one of the things that I have often done is looked at people that maybe are difficult in my life, and I say, well, I know Jesus said unity is important, and there's all the one another's of Scripture, and I should bear with one another, and to the point where I sometimes wonder, am I harming myself or other people around me that I care about because I'm trying to do the one another's and looking at unity as a goal when I'm not sure I'm doing this dance very well.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you may look for to say, okay, yes, the one another's of Scripture are important, but at the same time, not at the expense of your own mental health or your family's well-being. Is there any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot. Paul, who is not famous for really giving much of a rip what people think of him, apparently. He is a great example, though, of, there is such a fine line for humans around the one another's and what Paul calls fear of man. We'll call it approval seeking or people pleasing or codependency is the big buzzword now. But there is a difference between those two things, and we humans can go err on the side of, well, I just want to bear with them, and when they're causing all kinds of harm in life, there's it's a strange example, but there's a thing that we've taught for years and years around boundaries, that some people are people that you would keep in the driveway, and they can see you in your garage. They can know that I ride a bicycle, I have 2 cars, that kind of thing. And there are some people that you let into your formal living room. I don't think we have those anymore. Yeah. I grew up with a formal living room. Right. For some reason. We just couldn't go in there. For encyclopedia salesman and the pastor came, but there were only 2 people got to come into that room. Some people you let into your formal living room. Then other people get into the den, then the kitchen, then the bedroom. And then we go as far as say, there are bathroom people, where the real stuff happens. And so that little tool sometimes is real handy to say, hey, it is okay. I can love people well, and some people are like driveway people. For whatever reason, they don't come any closer into the core of my home because a temperament difference, a story difference, a way of dealing with things different expectations that can become demands. And so Paul provides a great example to say, I'm going to first and foremost tell the truth. And I'm going to let you deal with that truth, not because I don't care about you, but we want to become very binary and polarized in how we think about things. It's like, yes, people will say, well, I just want to not care what anybody thinks. Well, that's called sociopath. And so you want people, I want you to care about that. However, I want you to continue telling the truth in relationship, and when they have feelings, can I contain my own about them having theirs? And that's where boundaries come in. And so there are people that I have to say, I need you to stay at this distance, as much as how much contact we have with each other, or how much of my own story I share with you, or how much I hear back from you. And those are very scary conversations to have, and that's why we really need those core people in our lives, not to gossip about these people, but to say, I've really had to set some difficult boundaries, and it's been really scary to do it, but I've had to.
It does sound scary, especially if it's with a family member. What if it's like a parent? It's say you're an adult child and you've got a parent that is constantly crossing boundaries, not listening, doesn't really care because I'm the parent. I know you're the adult child, but it doesn't matter if you've been driving 34 years. I still need to tell you how to drive. Those kinds of things. Now, that may be harmless, but overall, how do you set that boundary? What do you do with that?
Yeah, again, very carefully. And we're talking about something here that I think actually needs to be talked about more. Boundary setting is super important, as we're talking about. And how we do that is how we sleep better at night. So we think, okay, I got to set the boundary. How do I set the boundary? And sometimes it's important to say, this is the effect the closeness of this relationship is having on me, and I need us to have more something distance from one another. I need you to not tell me how to drive or whatever it may be. And sometimes it comes down to I need to tell the truth with people that are harmful. And that doesn't mean they're harmful or toxic people. It means the nature of this relationship is harmful to me, maybe in other areas. I may have a friend that, man, I'll just pick on pickleball. I've never played pickleball, but I just love pickleball. My friend wants me to go every evening and play. Well, that doesn't mean he's toxic, but I may have to say, man, you got to stop asking me to play pickleball every night, because I'm just not going to do that kind of thing. It's a kind of a benign example too, but sometimes it's how we do that more so than what the boundary is. But we will often connect boundaries with, he or she are very I got to keep them at a distance. So sometimes keeping at a distance just means I can't have as much interaction with you as you may want us to have. Sometimes it's that simple.
And so one of the things that I've seen happen in my own life, you think we're in a great relationship, and so you don't really have much boundaries at all.
Yeah.
Right. And now the time comes where I need to dial it back.
Mm-hmm.
The dial it back conversation, as you say, difficult, potentially fearful to be able to do that. Is there a certain way in which you think that dial it back conversation goes better than just simply, hey, man, we can't do this way anymore?
Right. Yeah, there's so much. It's a scary word to answer that question, Steve, but the word is confrontation, and immediately most people think conflict, like that face right there.
Right.
Yeah, and so confrontation, if you think of the word, it means, the prefix con means with, and confrontation can mean just with front. And just sometimes to say the dial it back conversation can be, hey, man, my life situation is changed, or I've been confronted by my wife or whomever that I'm spending way too much time over here. I've got to invest some time here. And so that's going to mean that you and I can't do what we've been doing or the way we've been doing it or whatever. So sometimes that doesn't mean the infamous, it's not you, it's me. It's not that. It's like, because sometimes I need to take responsibility for how the relationship needs to change, and to go ahead and provide that reassurance to say, I would love to do this. I just can't. The important thing is that I'm spending time over here. And so I need for us to do this in that case. And so that happens so often, and it's a scary conversation to have.
And if the pickleball friend says, well, that hurts my feeling, like they either shut down or they can't seem to contain what you're honestly trying to tell them, honestly trying to share with them.
Yeah.
Do we have a responsibility to say, hey, I'm not trying to hurt you. I just can't play pickleball every night. But the feelings are still hurt. And then there's an offense. And then there's how do we keep following up and saying, listen, man, I didn't mean to hurt you.
Right.
I just can't play pickleball every night.
And that's where, and sometimes sometimes this question gets kind of thrown back, But if they say something like that, I'll say, well, what do you need in this conversation? Letting them know, I still have to have the boundary. And sometimes I say, well, I need you to play pickleball. I go, well, that's the part I can't do. But is there something I can do, whether it's reassurance or, we choose other times to do something. Maybe I can't play pickleball. We meet for coffee once a week or something. And, not like I'm giving them a list. How about this? How about this? How about this? But just to be able to say to them, a boundary is something I need to change. I need to move out here to where we're further apart from one another, whether it's frequency or depth or whatever, because of something over here. And do you need something in that from me that I can do?
That's it. Okay. You've got the wheels spinning like crazy right now. So that's good.
I had a parent that I tried to do that with, and that's something I can't do. And the response did not go well.
Yeah.
Because the control was wanted. And so, I finally did have to learn, I just had to hold that. Now, because we were in relationship, that was connected because it was a parent-child, then
Right.
we kind of still hung in there, but it was highly uncomfortable and not beneficial and sad.
Yeah.
But just he just could not hear that boundary well. If I'd say, no, you can't parent the children, you're the grandparent.
That's right.
I want you to be the grandparent. I want you to be present.
Sure.
I want you to be part of their lives, but that does not mean you get to parent them. And that boundary was hard for him to hear.
Sure. And I would imagine, depending on that level of relationship, you might need to be prepared to let somebody walk away.
That's exactly right. And here's another kind of on that note, Steve. It is so important to remember that so much, and I would challenge people, including this person, to do an experiment, I guess you would say. I do wonder how much anxiety, depression, and burnout is attributed to burning the candle at both ends and not being willing to let a relationship end if it has to. I really do wonder. I pose that question to a lot of people, both in the office and out, to say, set the boundary and then see what happens when you have set really good boundaries with time limitations or bandwidth limitations that you have. See what happens to your anxiety, your depression, or your burnout when you begin to do that and can contain people maybe walking away.
Yeah. All right. You give me something really good to think about.
Okay.
And maybe something really good for you to think about today as well. Phil Herndon, so appreciate you spending this time and hanging out with us and helping us think through some of this. Tin Man Ministries, links and details in the show notes. Hope you'll check it out.
Thanks for joining us for the Dawn and Steve Plus podcast. We're a listener-supported, non-profit podcast, and we're grateful for your generous support. You can give at dawnandsteveplus.com. Our producer is yours truly, Stephen Briggs, with assistance from Chris Westmoreland. Please like and subscribe to Dawn and Steve Plus anywhere you get your podcasts and on all our socials. Links to what we talk about and to Raphael's Roastery are in the show notes below. Thanks for joining us and being our plus one.